the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.
Well, that happened 50 years ago last night in Memphis, and 50 years ago today, James Earl Ray struck and killed Martin Luther King at that balcony. They're commemorating it 50 years later today in Memphis. ABC News' Ryan Burrow is there. Good morning, Ryan.
Good morning. Again, last night at the Mason Temple here in Memphis, where that speech from the mountaintop occurred, there was essentially another revival of that. They played part of it. There were speakers, including Dr. King's daughter, Bernice King, and Martin Luther King III, his son. And they talked about keeping his message alive and some of the activism they're seeing today that they're inspired by and would have been inspired by Dr. King, including the Black Lives Matter demonstrations, including the Me Too movement, and including the March for Our Lives movement involving many young people.
You know what's interesting is that speech 50 years ago, he almost had a premonition saying, right, I might not get to the promised land. And then the very next day, he is shot and killed, right? I mean, that's just eerie.
It was absolutely incredible. Yeah, if you listen to the words of those speech, he talks about, how he's seen the other side, and he's also talked about how longevity is not that big of a deal. Like almost saying, like, look, I know that I'm not long for this earth, and I'm okay with that because I've seen the other side. So, it was a remarkable speech, and he was there to support the sanitation workers. A sanitation workers strike. The sanitation workers were being paid essentially dirt. I mean, I think one of the sanitation workers here said $74 every 3 weeks. And you may remember just prior to his funeral, they did hold that rally and that march after all here in Memphis. And there's going to be a lot of celebration about that, as well as the life of Dr. King today at the Lorraine Motel.
Right. So what's the plan for today in Memphis?
So there are marches, rallies, symposiums going on all across the city. The big event, though, at about 3:30 Central Time is going to be the big panel discussion that's going on at the Civil Rights Museum, which is located at the Lorraine Motel. And then at 6 o'clock, 6:01 to be specific, the time when Dr. King was cut down, they will begin tolling bells 39 times in honor of the 39 years he was alive on this earth. And that'll actually be taking place across the country. So you may be hearing bells tolling around 6 o'clock, and that's the reason why.
Ryan Burrow, you've got a front row seat for history. Thanks for checking in. Be safe down there. Have a good day.
Take care.
All right. We mentioned earlier in the show that James Earl Ray escaped from a Missouri prison and then was out and then found himself in Memphis and then escaped. And they found him 2 months later in London. And it was just by one of the agents noticed the name on his passport was odd, and she thought she had seen that name was on some watch list somewhere. This is in 1968.
The fact that he, got a passport after.
Right. Yeah. And then she flagged him, and the authorities came in, and he had a couple of different passports, and they then extradited him back to Tennessee, and then spent the rest of his life in jail after being convicted.
That speech, I've been to the mountaintop, he was not even going to go to that church that night, the night before. He was in his pajamas. It was a rainy night. And one of his aides called him and said, "This is your crowd. This is your crowd." And he's like, "You want me to come out of the rain?" And he did.
That speech is so, everyone points to the I Have a Dream speech in Washington, D.C. I think this one is much more, fiery, I don't know what it is. It's just something.
A lot of his people close to him said that really revitalized him after giving that speech that night.
Here's what it sounded like 50 years ago. Listen to this.
This is Tom Gerald. I'm in Memphis at the Lorraine Motel where Dr. King was shot tonight, apparently by a sniper. The Reverend Jesse Jackson, a member of Dr. King's staff, has given me these details. Dr. King was standing on a second-floor balcony outside his motel room talking to some friends on the ground level. Reverend Jackson says he was standing alongside him when suddenly Dr. King was knocked off of his feet by a bullet which hit him in the head, in the face.
Wow.